The cold in Orevel was not merely a season. It was a presence, ancient and unyielding. Snow blanketed the cobblestones of the capital, frost clung stubbornly to the bare trees, and even the rivers had long fallen silent, their surfaces locked beneath thick sheets of ice. The kingdom of Orevel, once a land of bountiful harvests and blooming meadows, had become a realm of brittle desolation. The winter had stretched on longer than any elder could recall, its unrelenting grip choking the life from the soil and the hope from the hearts of its people. In the heart of the palace, where the walls themselves seemed to shiver, Princess Lysara wandered the halls like a shadow. Her royal duties felt futile in the face of such relentless despair. Day by day, she witnessed her people suffering, children with hollow eyes and thin faces, farmers whose calloused hands now begged for bread. Her father, the king, grew graver with each passing moon, his voice a strained whisper of plans and prayers. One evening, as the blizzard howled like a mournful spirit outside, Lysara found herself drawn to the royal library. It was a cavernous chamber, filled with rows of ancient tomes and manuscripts bound in leather and time. The scent of parchment and ink clung to the air, offering a strange comfort. Here, among the relics of forgotten wisdom, she sought answers, a cure for the kingdom's frozen affliction. She ran her fingers along the spines of dusty volumes, her heart heavy with unspoken desperation. The hours stretched into the night, the flicker of a single candle her only companion. It was then, in the deepest corner of the library, that her gaze fell upon an unassuming book, its cover marred by age and its title worn to obscurity. Inside, she found a map unlike any she had seen before. It was drawn in delicate ink, depicting the outline of Orevel, but with curious additions, hidden trails, obscure markings, and at the map's center, an ornate sigil she didn't recognize. Beneath the sigil, an inscription caught her eye. Beyond the veil where seasons sleep, lies spring eternal, a treasure to keep. But tread with care, for beauty deceives, and the cost of its wonder no mortal believes. Lysara's pulse quickened. The words felt alive, as though they had waited centuries to be read. She studied the map more closely, noting a path leading to a remote valley in the eastern mountains, a place long believed to be barren and unreachable. The faint whisper of possibility stirred within her. A garden of eternal spring, untouched by the icy claws of winter. Could such a place exist? And if it did, could it save her people? A sudden gust of wind extinguished her candle, plunging the library into darkness. Lysara's heart raced as she clutched the map, the silence around her thick and oppressive. For a moment, she thought she heard something, a faint sound, like petals brushing against stone. She turned, her breath caught in her throat, but the room was empty, save for the ancient tomes and shadows that seemed to shift under her gaze. The next morning, she presented her findings to the king. Her father's face, worn by worry, tightened with skepticism as she recounted the tale of the garden. Yet, as Lysara spoke, her conviction lit a spark in his weary eyes. Desperation, she knew, could make believers of even the most pragmatic rulers. "You will not go alone," he declared. "The journey is treacherous, and if this is but a myth..." He stopped, his voice cracking. "You are the last hope of this kingdom." But Lysara shook her head. "This is a path I must walk alone, father. The garden calls to me as if it knows my name." Though reluctant, the king relented, his pride warring with fear. As the court prepared her provisions and cloak, rumors of her quest spread among the servants and guards. Some whispered prayers for her safety, while others muttered of folly and the futility of chasing fairy tales. Yet none dared stop her as she mounted her steed at dawn, the map tucked safely against her breast. The wind bit at her cheeks as she rode through the city gates, leaving behind the only world she had ever known. The whispers of petals, faint yet insistent, seemed to follow her into the horizon. Aurivel's winter, cruel and unyielding, stretched endlessly behind her. But ahead lay the unknown, a journey that would lead her to the heart of mystery and the brink of truth. The journey to the eastern mountains was as foreboding as the map had suggested. Princess Lysara, cloaked in fur to ward off the biting cold, pressed on through desolate landscapes that seemed untouched by life. Each step deeper into the wilderness felt like stepping into the pages of a forgotten myth. The world grew quieter, as if the very air held its breath in anticipation. On the third day, the snow began to thin, replaced by a peculiar mist that clung to the earth in twisting tendrils. The sun, pale and distant, barely pierced the veil of fog, casting the land in an eerie twilight. The trail carved into the map had led her to the base of a jagged peak. Here, a narrow crevice yawned between two ancient stone formations, overgrown with frost-touched ivy. It seemed to hum faintly, as if it held a secret only those who dared enter might discover. Lysara dismounted and tethered her horse to a nearby tree. With a deep breath, she stepped into the crevice, her fingers brushing the stone walls for guidance. The air inside was warmer, almost unnaturally so, and carried the faint scent of blooming flowers. A stark contrast to the frozen world she had left behind. Emerging from the passage, she found herself in a valley bathed in golden light. It was as if she had crossed into another realm entirely. Before her stretched the garden of eternal spring, a landscape so breathtakingly beautiful it seemed almost unreal. Fields of vibrant wildflowers swayed gently despite the absence of wind. Trees bore blossoms in every hue, their branches heavy with fruit glistening like jewels. Streams wove through the garden, their waters so clear they appeared like liquid glass. Birdsong filled the air, strange and melodious, unlike anything Lysara had heard before. The very ground beneath her boots felt alive, thrumming with an energy that made her heart quicken. And yet, despite the garden's splendor, a strange unease prickled at the edges of her mind. The beauty was too perfect, too untouched, as if it had been frozen in a moment of time. She ventured further, her steps cautious as she drank in the sights around her. A grove of ancient trees caught her attention, their trunks twisted into shapes that seemed almost deliberate. Figures locked in a dance or a struggle, though their meaning eluded her. The longer she stared, the more her unease grew, as if the trees themselves were watching her. Lysara knelt by a stream to drink, its water impossibly cool and sweet. As she rose, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A figure in the distance, half hidden among the blooms. Her heart leapt and she called out, her voice echoing through the garden. The figure did not respond, but moved gracefully closer, its silhouette shimmering as if not entirely real. When the figure emerged into the light, Lysara's breath caught. It was a woman, or something that appeared to be one. Her hair cascaded down her back in a cascade of silver and gold, interwoven with living vines and blossoms. Her robes shimmered with the colors of dawn, and her eyes held an ancient, knowing gleam. She seemed as much a part of the garden as the trees or the streams. "Welcome, traveler," the woman said, her voice smooth and melodic, though tinged with something Lysara could not place. "You have journeyed far." "I have," Lysara replied, regaining her composure. "Are you the keeper of this place?" "I am Amara," the woman said, inclining her head. "The guardian of the garden of eternal spring." Lysara felt a mixture of relief and wariness. "I come seeking aid for my kingdom. Oravel is locked in a winter that will not end. The tales speak of this garden as a place of eternal spring, a wellspring of life that could save us." Amara's lips curved into a smile, though it held a strange sadness. "This garden is indeed eternal, a sanctuary of beauty and abundance. But the power you seek is not given lightly, nor without consequence." Her words sent a chill through Lysara, though the air remained warm. "What do you mean?" Amara stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "The garden provides, but all gifts come at a price. Will you pay it, I wonder? Or will you turn away before the truth reveals itself?" Lysara opened her mouth to question further, but Amara raised a hand, silencing her. "For now, rest. Explore. Let the garden speak to you, and perhaps you will understand." The enigmatic woman turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving Lysara alone with her thoughts. The garden, so full of light and life, now felt like a riddle she could not yet solve. She wandered its paths, her eyes drinking in its splendor, even as her mind raced with questions. What was the cost of its beauty? And could she bear it for the sake of her kingdom? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in hues of amber and rose. A faint whisper reached her ears. It was the same sound she had heard in the library, the whisper of petals brushing against stone. This time, she did not turn away. Night in the garden of eternal spring was unlike any Lysara had ever known. A luminous glow seemed to emanate from the blossoms themselves, casting the world in hues of gold and silver. The air hummed softly, as if the garden were alive, breathing in its quiet slumber. Yet, sleep eluded Lysara. Her mind churned with questions, and her heart carried the weight of Amara's cryptic words. The whispers came again, faint and fleeting, drawing her deeper into the garden. She followed them as if compelled by an unseen force, her footsteps soundless on the soft, mossy ground. They led her to a clearing where a solitary tree stood, its trunk gnarled and ancient, its branches heavy with blooms of iridescent gold. Beneath it sat Amara, her figure bathed in the ethereal light. In her lap rested a small harp, its strings glinting like threads of moonlight. "You cannot rest," Amara said without turning, her voice soft but resonant. "The questions weigh too heavily." Lysara hesitated before stepping into the clearing. "You speak of price and consequence, yet offer no answers. What is this place truly? And why does it feel wrong?" Amara plucked a single note from the harp, the sound lingering in the air like a ripple across water. "The garden is a sanctuary, a refuge from the ravages of time. It was created to preserve life and beauty, to protect what the world so easily discards." "Created by whom?" Lysara asked, her voice sharpening. Amara's gaze lifted to the sky, her eyes reflecting the garden's glow. "By those who feared the decay of the mortal world. They bound the seasons here, caging spring in an eternal moment." Lysara felt a chill despite the warmth of the air. "But at what cost? You spoke of a price. What is it?" Amara sighed, her fingers brushing the harp strings again. "The garden does not sustain itself. Its beauty, its life, is drawn from the world beyond its borders. The longer it thrives, the more the land around it suffers. The endless winter that plagues your kingdom is but one ripple of its influence." The truth struck Lysara like a blade. The splendor before her was no miracle. It was a theft, a siphoning of life from her people. Her hands clenched at her sides. "And you allow this to continue?" "I am its keeper, bound to its fate," Amara replied, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Long ago I was mortal like you. My people faced destruction, their fields scorched by an unrelenting sun. In my desperation, I invoked ancient magic to create this sanctuary. But the spell demanded more than I understood. It demanded me. I am tethered to the garden, its eternal guardian and prisoner." The weight of her words settled heavily in the air. Lysara stared at Amara, seeing the centuries etched in her ethereal form. "Then you know this cannot continue. My kingdom is dying." How can you sit here, surrounded by this false spring, knowing the suffering it causes?" Amara's gaze met hers, unflinching. "Because I have no choice. The magic is unyielding. If the garden cycle is broken, it will unravel entirely. All that it has preserved will perish, including me." The confession left Lesara breathless. The woman before her was not a villain, but a victim, ensnared by a desperate act of love for her people. And yet, the garden's existence came at a cost too great to bear. Her kingdom's survival depended on ending this enchantment, even if it meant destroying the garden and Amara with it. "Is there no way to end this without destruction?" Lesara asked, her voice cracking with desperation. Amara shook her head slowly. "The garden's roots run deep into the fabric of the world. To sever them will be to release all that has been bound: chaos, death, and renewal. Such is the way of nature, princess. Nothing lasts forever, not even beauty." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves. Lesara's mind churned. The choice before her was cruel and unforgiving: to allow the garden to continue its parasitic existence, or to end it and risk the unknown. Amara rose, her form graceful yet weary. "Rest, Lesara. The path you choose will not wait long. The garden will speak to you as it spoke to me all those years ago. But be warned, its whispers are not always kind." As Amara vanished into the shadows, Lesara sank to her knees beneath the golden tree, the weight of her mission pressing down on her. The garden's beauty now felt oppressive, its perfection a reminder of the suffering it demanded. She closed her eyes, and in the silence, the whispers returned, soft, haunting, and relentless. The whispers did not cease, not even in the quiet of dawn. They seemed to grow louder, more insistent, tugging at Lesara's very soul. Sleep eluded her entirely as she wandered deeper into the garden, following trails that seemed to appear only when she sought them. The beauty around her no longer enchanted. It suffocated, each perfect petal and blade of grass, a stark reminder of the hidden price. Her path led her to the garden's heart, where the air grew thicker, charged with an energy that set her nerves on edge. Here the golden light dimmed, replaced by an eerie luminescence that cast shadows sharper than the sun ever could. At the center of this space stood a tree unlike any she had seen before. Its trunk was blackened and twisted, its roots clawing into the earth like skeletal fingers. Despite its withered appearance, its branches bore blossoms of radiant gold, their petals shimmering unnaturally. At the base of the tree lay an ancient stone altar, its surface etched with symbols and runes that seemed to writhe and shift when she looked too closely. Lesara approached cautiously, her breath catching as the whispers rose to a crescendo. They seemed to emanate from the tree itself, words in a language she could not understand, but somehow felt in her bones. Her hand trembled as she traced the carvings on the altar. They told a story, their imagery stark and unflinching. A village consumed by drought, its people withered and desperate. A woman, a figure eerily resembling Amara, kneeling before the altar, her hands raised in supplication. The next scene showed the garden in its full glory, the villagers rejoicing as spring returned to their land. But the final image chilled Lysara to her core. The villagers, one by one, falling lifeless as the garden flourished, their spirits drawn into the tree to feed its eternal cycle. The whispers sharpened, turning into cries of anguish that echoed in her mind. Lysara stumbled back, her vision swimming. The truth was undeniable. The garden's eternal spring was no miracle but a curse, sustained by the lives it consumed. The unending winter in Oravel, the slow death of her people, was the price paid for this stolen beauty. Amara's words returned to her. The garden provides, but all gifts come at a price. Lysara's stomach churned. This was no sanctuary. It was a prison, a parasitic blight on the natural order. Do you see now? The voice startled her, its smoothness piercing the tumult in her mind. She turned to find Amara standing at the edge of the clearing, her expression unreadable. You knew, Lysara said, her voice trembling with anger and grief. You knew all along what this place was, what it did, and yet you allowed it to endure. Amara stepped closer, her movements graceful but heavy with the weight of centuries. I did not create this willingly. I was desperate, as you are now. I sought to save my people, not knowing the cost until it was too late. Her gaze softened, but there was no apology in her eyes. I am bound to this place, Lysara. Its magic has claimed me as it claims all who enter. Even now, it reaches for you. Lysara felt it then, a faint pull at the edges of her being, like invisible threads tugging at her essence. She shivered, stepping back instinctively. It cannot continue. This garden must end, for the sake of my people and all those who suffer because of it. Amara's expression darkened. Do you think I do not know that? But to end the garden is to destroy it utterly. All that it has preserved will perish, including me. The balance of nature will return, but at a cost you may not be willing to bear. Lysara's mind raced, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. To let the garden continue was unthinkable, but to destroy it meant sacrificing Amara and unleashing a chaos she could not fully comprehend. Yet, as she thought of Oravel, its children huddled against the cold, its fields buried under ice, her resolve hardened. What must I do? She asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. Amara's gaze held hers, a flicker of admiration crossing her face. The altar is the key. The spell that binds the garden is etched into its stone. To break it, you must shatter the altar and sever the tree's roots. But know this, Lysara, the magic will not go quietly. It will fight you and it will cost you dearly." The princess stepped toward the altar, her hand resting on its cold surface. The whispers rose again, now pleading and desperate, as if the garden itself begged for mercy. She steeled herself, her heart pounding. "I will do what must be done," she said, her voice firm. "For my kingdom, for my people, and for the world this garden has stolen from." Amara nodded, her sorrowful smile returning. "Then may you find the strength to see it through. But beware, Lysara. This is only the beginning of the storm." Lysara stood before the altar, her resolve a fragile flame flickering against the tempest of fear swelling within her. The whispers were no longer faint. They roared in her ears, voices layered with anger, pleading and despair. The garden seemed alive with movement, shadows shifting among the trees, the ground trembling as though the earth itself resisted her presence. She drew a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The blade in her hand, taken from her saddle before entering the garden, felt heavy with purpose. Amara stood at the edge of the clearing, her form wreathed in an otherworldly glow. For the first time, her calm facade cracked, revealing the weight of centuries etched into her gaze. "Lysara," Amara said, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "Once you begin, there is no turning back. The garden will defend itself, and its magic will seek to claim you." Lysara nodded, gripping the hilt of the blade tightly. "If I falter, my people will perish. I will not let that happen." With a single decisive motion, she drove the blade into the altar. The runes carved into its surface flared with blinding light, and the ground beneath her feet shuddered violently. A deafening crack split the air as the altar fractured, its ancient stone collapsing inward. From the depths of the fissure came a surge of energy that sent Lysara stumbling backward. The garden reacted at once. The golden blossoms on the tree began to wilt, their radiant petals falling like tears. The streams turned dark and sluggish, their crystal clarity replaced by murky turbulence. The once lush fields shuddered, their vibrant greens fading to dull greys. The whispers became screams, an anguished cacophony that seemed to emanate from every corner of the garden. Lysara rose to her feet, her body trembling but her determination unwavering. She turned to the tree, its blackened trunk writhing as though alive. The roots began to pull free from the earth, releasing plumes of dark energy that coiled like smoke. The tree's branches swayed violently, as if resisting its inevitable end. "Finish it!" Amara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Sever the roots, and the curse will be broken!" Lysara ran to the base of the tree, her blade glinting in the dim light. As she raised it to strike, the shadows around her coalesced into shapes. Figures formed from the garden's magic, their hollow eyes filled with sorrow and rage. They surged toward her, their forms flickering like flames. The first figure reached her, its grasping hands cold as death. Lysara swung her blade, slicing through its ephemeral form, but more came, each one a testament to the soul's sacrifice to sustain the garden. They bore no malice, only a desperate longing that tore at her heart. "Forgive me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I do this for the living." With a cry of defiance, she struck at the roots. The blade bit deep, and a surge of energy shot through her, searing her veins with white-hot pain. She staggered but did not relent, driving the blade deeper until the roots splintered. One by one, she severed the roots, each strike unleashing a wave of power that threatened to consume her. The garden's screams reached a fever pitch, the air thick with the weight of its anguish. The tree began to collapse, its once mighty branches snapping like brittle bones. Amara stepped forward, her face serene despite the destruction around her. "You have done it," Amara said, her voice soft and distant. "The garden cycle is broken. The balance will return." As the tree fell, a radiant light burst forth from its core, engulfing the clearing. Lysara shielded her eyes, the brilliance blinding her. When it subsided, the garden was gone. The vibrant colours, the eternal spring, everything had faded to ash and silence. The ground was barren, the air still. Amara stood before Lysara, her form translucent, her eyes filled with gratitude and peace. "You have freed me," she said, her voice echoing as if from a great distance. "And you have saved your people. My time is done, but your story is just beginning." Before Lysara could respond, Amara's form dissolved into light, her essence scattering like petals on the wind. The whispers were gone, replaced by an emptiness that felt both sorrowful and serene. Lysara sank to her knees, the blade slipping from her hand. Tears streamed down her face, not for the garden, but for the sacrifices it had demanded. She had undone the curse, but the weight of what she had destroyed lingered in her heart. As the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, Lysara emerged from the valley. The air was crisp and alive, the frost melting beneath her boots. In the distance she saw the horizon, clear and untouched, as though winter itself had begun to retreat. When she returned to Aurivel, the kingdom was already stirring with signs of renewal. Snow melted into streams, fields began to thaw, and the people, though weary, dared to hope. Lysara carried no trophies from the garden, only the memory of its beauty and its curse, a reminder that even the most radiant light could cast the deepest shadows. The legend of the Garden of Eternal Spring would be whispered for generations, its tale of sacrifice and redemption woven into the fabric of Aurivel's history. But for Lysara, it was not a legend. It was the burden she bore, the choice she made, and the truth she uncovered. A truth as fleeting and eternal as the blossoms that once adorned the garden.